Blake, how far would you walk for white cheddar popcorn?
Toby, if I walk more than 10 steps, my Fitbit starts to freak out because it thinks my heart rate is pushing 150.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your co-host, Blake Hodges, a man who is typically trying to avoid heart disease, but that's difficult when you can't run from it. And I'm here with my co-host who has volunteered to walk on my behalf for me now, Toby Walters.
I think you could literally run from heart disease. I think that's kind of the point.
But what I'm saying is if I run, my heart will explode, so I don't think it does work.
Oh, your poor heart. It does the work of 4 normal humans for very little result.
I don't even have a response. That's a pretty good burn.
So last night, my wife, I won't say my wife dragged me because I love my wife, so I do whatever she wants because she's so pretty. But she asked me to go to a benefit dinner.
Toby, you are not fancy enough for a benefit dinner.
We'll get there, Blake. That's for sure. So she is part of this amazing organization that does ELL, English Language Learners. So like refugees from other countries that move to the United States and they don't speak any English, like nothing. They will come to this nonprofit ministry that our church helps support. And my wife is one of the teachers, so she'll help teach them English from the beginning.
I bet your wife is great at that because she has to practice. She gets to practice on you all the time. Like she's still trying to teach you English.
Blake, watch your mouth.
All right.
So it was hosted at Brentwood Baptist, and a lot of our listeners are familiar with Brentwood Baptist. Like it's a big church, and they do like modern services, but they're also just like a little bit more traditional than you and I, Blake.
You got pews in there, yeah.
Not anymore.
Oh, the pews are gone.
Yeah, they did their whole upgrade. Like they renovated the whole campus and now they have chairs. It's big time. I'm sure there was a lot of uproar.
I was just about to say, there must have been rioting in the pews. I mean, in the chairs.
I wonder if some of those pews are like still on campus as far as like if you need your pew fix, you can go into, Hudson Hall or whatever it is.
Oh, actually, I think we bought them all, Toby. They're in the warehouse right now.
Oh, no, we are not buying pews. I've told you. So my wife said, this is a little bit fancier event. You can't wear jeans. And so I luckily own one pair of slacks because the last time my wife said we were doing something fancy and I didn't own slacks, I went to the mall that day and bought slacks. So
when people think this is a bit, this is
no, it's 100% true.
Is.
And what frustrated me most, and I reminded my wife of it every time, there were 3 like of the hosts on stage that were wearing jeans. And I was like, they're on stage in jeans and I had to wear slacks? This was messed up, man.
Yeah, this is outrageous.
So one of the guests for the evening, he went through the program. He is from Kenya, and he grew up in Nairobi, Kenya, and he and his wife came over 5-6 years ago. And so he said growing up in Kenya, he kind of gave some of his story, and it's a very different life for him. And so it was a very hard story to hear. Like his
made wearing those slacks a little easier, didn't
it? Yeah, my problem seemed a little bit smaller after hearing his story. So he's talking about his mom passed away, and then he went to live with his aunt, and his aunt became sick with HIV. And so he said, I'm like, 15 years old trying to take care of my aunt who's dying of HIV, and all my cousins, which were her children, just like left, kind of abandoned her. And so he said, once a week, I would walk to the store to get groceries. And he said round trip, it was a 27-mile walk. And Blake, I'm thinking of you walking like more than 10 steps for white cheddar popcorn. And so he's literally walking 27 miles.
He can walk more miles than I can steps.
Yes. So he said one time he was on his way back with his groceries. And so he'd have to walk 13 miles to the store and then he'd have to walk 13 miles back. And he said carrying groceries, he'd have groceries on his head. Like it's a very different lifestyle that he grew up with. And so he said this one night he was walking back and he said it was around 9 p.m. And he said he either heard it or he sensed it that there was something behind him.
No.
And so he turns around.
It's a lion, isn't it?
Close. It was a pack of hyenas.
Even worse.
He said there was more than a dozen hyenas following him. And so he didn't know what to do.
He should have told him to get back on the set of Lion King.
Yes, exactly. What's the doofus one? Ed?
Oh, don't tell me that's me, Toby.
We'll come back to that later, Ed.
Oh, boy.
So he said, obviously, you can't outrun these hyenas. And so he said he felt the Spirit of the Lord just say, start singing the song you know. And so he turned around and kept walking at his normal pace, singing, I know that my Redeemer lives. And Blake, I don't know if you know this song. It's a very famous song that Nicole Mullen wrote and recorded maybe 20 years ago at this point. And so he's telling this story on stage and he's crying through it. And all of us are like trying to hold it together, like chills on our skin.
Toby's slacks are so wet by this point from the tears.
So he had said that growing up in Kenya, he always dreamed of being a musician. And so he started singing this song, My Redeemer Lives, and he's got a voice. And the craziest thing is that somebody pointed out, I think it was the person hosting up on stage that was kind of hosting this interview, like you and I host this podcast. She turns to him and says, do you know that Nicole Mullen is sitting at your table?
What?
Nicole Mullen was the musical guest at this event, and she was sitting at his table as he is telling the story of singing her song while escaping a pack of hyenas in Kenya. Like, all of us are just like, oh my gosh, this was total like the Holy Spirit moment. I wish our guests could see your mouth right now.
Man, my mind is blown.
Yeah.
Like, that is such a crazy story, and I can only think of one thing better than that story would be bringing in our guest today, which does whatever Mike Smith did here, but officially he's the tech director for Harvest Church in Riverside. Chris, Toby, you want to try?
Eguizabal. Eguizabal? Eguizabal? Eguizabal.
Chris, help us here. We're dying. We look so stupid.
It's Eguizabal.
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 A lot of people just call me Squeezy Ball, though. For some reason, it morphed into that.
Eguizabal. Is that Kenyan? Is that the link to the story?
Spain, actually.
Oh, nice. I like Chris Squeezy Ball, though.
Chris Squeezy Ball.
That's what everyone calls me here. So
I like eggs ball. Like, if you put eggs in a ball and then like kick it around, I don't think the eggs are going to make it.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, we have got 5 truths and a lie for you to play, and you've made it very simple so much that I'm scared. All of your 5 truths and a lie.
It's all work.
And is it like, what are the chances? Like, number 3 is I was chased by a pack of hyenas through Riverside Park one day.
I guess we're going to find out. Number 1, worked at Disneyland. Number 2, worked for Universal Studios. Competitors there.
Yep.
Number 3, worked for Elton John, fellow competitor.
Who is Elton John a competitor? You said fellow competitor. You
Us.
feel like you are competing with Elton John, or we are?
For Star Power, Toby.
For Star, I don't think Elton John sees us as his competitor.
Because he's not looking in the right places. Number 4, worked on a television show. Number 5, worked in a galaxy far, far away.
That's the lie.
Does that mean he lived in Star Wars?
Nobody's been to a galaxy far, far away. Okay.
Worked on the Grammy Awards.
Man, this is a good list. Now, he's in Southern California, and a lot of these things, I mean, Elton John, I'm sure, has done many things in Southern California. He's probably an LA guy.
I'm gonna call my shot now. He's
Okay.
not worked on a television show.
All right. I'm going to say that he worked for Universal Studios, but never worked at Disneyland.
All right,
So we'll see.
Toby's got Universal. I've got television show. Chris, what was your lie?
I was Elton John and a galaxy far, far away.
So you did 2 lies?
Technically, I guess if you count Disneyland, you could put galaxy far, far away. But yeah, I used to work at Disneyland. I worked for Universal. And then, I did a television show called Save to Win, it was called. And then I did work on the Grammy Awards like a while ago. It was like one of my early gigs exposed to the industry, thankfully. So
He exposed himself to the industry. Oh, man. That's a
someone
headline there.
exposed me to the industry. Yeah. That's the new documentary coming out.
Okay, so both of us lost. Chris won. He's going to expose himself to the industry now, so he's definitely going to lose too.
And he gave us 2 chances to win, and we still lost.
That's a good point. So, Chris, we have Elton John and a galaxy far, far away on the phone right now, both looking for your services. Which one are you going to pick?
because I feel like Elton John's lighting guy does such a good job. I'll probably go for the Galaxy Far, Far Away.
Less competition.
Yeah, less pressure, I guess.
And the lighting there is like literal lightsabers. So, I mean, that's a lot
true.
more fun creativity there.
And Blake, I'm assuming at this point you know who Elton John is. It seems impressive when you know who anybody famous is older than 10.
Dude, I know Elton John because, well, I'm not going to say why, but I know who he is. Let's just keep that between us.
And I love me some Elton John songs. Like he's got some amazing tunes.
Bangers, for sure.
Hold Me Close, Tony Danza. You know that one, right?
Who is Tony Danza?
You don't know who Tony Danza? See, now we're back to
Wait,
your
why is
lack
he
of
holding
knowledge.
Tony so close? Are they
So
friends?
Tony Danza is an actor. He was
Okay.
on Who's the Boss, if you ever
I know that
show
that's a
from
show.
the 80s. But then I think it was in Friends where Joey said, yeah, the Elton John song, Hold Me Close, Tony Danza. But it's actually Tiny Dancer is the song.
Oh, well, I did watch Friends.
Yeah, at least there's that. Not the first go around, but on Netflix.
Well, I had to binge it to get in favor of my boss. Why do you think I watched The Office when I started working here?
Okay, Chris, Disneyland versus Universal. Which did you prefer working at?
I love Disney. That was my first job, so it'll be forever my favorite.
Oh, what did you do there?
I was a stage technician and programmer. So yeah, got hired at 19, so I was very young. I was like drinking through a fire hose, but it was a lot of fun.
I wonder what percentage of the, production people in the Orlando area versus LA have worked at Disney.
It's got to be a bunch.
Yeah, but I feel like in Orlando, you're probably 10 times more likely just because Disney World is so big.
Oh yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, out here is a lot other areas you could get into, but Orlando, it's pretty much theme parks only. Yeah.
It's true.
What'd you do at Universal Studios?
I did their grad nights for a while, and then just a bunch of random special events. So, yeah.
Okay, and I want to know about the Grammy Awards. When was this? What did you do? And what was the experience like?
And what did you do to expose yourself to the industry?
That's the After Dark episode.
Yes. Well, one of my friends was on that show and pretty much just asked if they needed extra techs. So they brought me along, and I just soaked up everything I could from everyone on that show. Gosh, I forgot what year it is. It was probably a good 12 years ago now. So it's been a minute. But yeah, I think it was 19 too. Yeah. So it was crazy.
So how many, do you have any rough estimate? Like how many production people does it take to pull off the Grammys?
I'd say easily over 200 to load it in. Yeah. It was wild. It's a ton of rigging, and it's about a week and a half load in, 2 weeks.
Dang.
So,
and at the Staples Center?
yeah, this was when it was at the Staples Center that year. It's kind of been all over the place, but yeah, Staples or Crypto now is where I think it currently still happens.
And so you were like production load in, kind of
just the
whipping
lighting
boy.
tech.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did
pretty
you
much.
get to do anything really cool for specific artists? Or
Not really. Just definitely got to watch the programmers program and learn from all them, and it was a great time. But yeah.
Blake, I feel like our ultimate goal is to host the Grammys. Do you think we could get to that someday?
Toby,
I think
our ultimate goal is to be elected president and vice president of the United States.
That sounds awful. I don't want that job.
We don't want the job. We just want to win and then leave. I didn't say we were going to do the job. None of them do it.
Can you imagine if we're hosting the Grammys and Taylor Swift is like one of the, presenters or artists or guests or whatever? Like you would have to just be in a straitjacket the whole time.
Well, they'd also be like, why is the president and the vice president hosting the Grammys?
So Chris, 19 doing the Grammys, give us some of your background. Like how did you get started in tech, and what led you to where you're at with Harvest today?
Well, I started when I was 15, got into some theater programs because I was in middle school, high school age range there. So I was homeschooled for high school. And so it gave me opportunity to just do like theater programs. My goal was to work at Disney. And so I did everything I could to get the experience to qualify for that. Met some mentors who worked there because my parents both worked at Disneyland as well. So we were there all the time. And I just met some people who worked there. And those guys kind of raised me up and helped me get, the experience I needed, pointing me in the right direction. I did volunteer at Harvest at that age too for a while. It wasn't a goal to work at Harvest at that time. And so I ended up getting the job offer at Disney. So I worked there for a while, and then my dad got sick, and so I had to leave there because my parents had gotten divorced, and so I was like when you're the like lawyer, I guess, or the legal person for them to make decisions. So I had to be there all the time to make decisions in the hospital. So
power of attorney.
Power of attorney, and ended up leaving Disney. It just was the right time, and I learned a lot. There was like drinking through a fire hose. It was crazy, and met a lot of great people. Once I left there, did freelance, and then I still do a lot of freelance, but then Harvest hired me right then. I think I just turned 20. And so I started out as the lighting designer. Did that for probably 10 years while doing freelance on the side, and then eventually got bumped up to production supervisor, which was just over one campus. And then I'd say about 3 years ago now, I got promoted to tech director, production manager, which is over all our campuses. So we got 3 campuses right now. And yeah, so I oversee a team of 15 people and 15 staff and 20 volunteers, which is growing volunteer wise. And yeah, that's where I'm at now. Still do freelance. I mean, the great thing about working at Harvest is they've been really gracious and great with flexibility, allowing all of us to do freelance if we wanted to. So it's a great opportunity to get like fresh air and go see other techniques and what technology is happening and see what other people are doing, and grow your creative skills outside of Harvest. Because you do the same thing every week, it can get kind of mundane, or you just kind of get stagnant creatively. So it really helps keep the creativity flowing. And they've been great with how flexible they are with allowing me to do it too. Because at my position, it's kind of hard to allow someone to do that. And so the team has been solid though, and it's always great to do that because you end up sharpening your skills, doing freelance and everything, and then you're able to bring it back and use those skills here, which has been great. So
we've given Blake the flexibility to freelance as well, to hopefully sharpen his skills, but nobody else is willing to hire him. So it's been kind of a wash.
Here's the thing, Chris, live Church Tech Confessional on the show. I don't disclose that. It's company policy to say when we freelance, but I can't do it because then Toby will know I work for all the competitors of Church Gear, of which there are many. You do have to freelance here. It's in the benefits package to help pay for our salaries because we don't actually get paid anything. It's all volunteer work.
Now, I think it was, I think it might have been Adam Grant recently, but he said that there have been studies that show that moonlighting is actually beneficial to the employees and the company because of what you're saying, Chris, that like you're getting other experiences outside of that, and then you can bring it back, and it almost energizes the employee, the team member to just enjoy their job a little bit more.
Moonlighting. I'm trying to sleep when the moon's out. I don't know about you guys.
I end up being up, unfortunately, but.
So Chris, I kind of chuckle a little bit at, the whole contracting for other gigs because I know how much Harvest does for like major events already. I grew up going to the Harvest Crusades. I mean, I've been to probably 5 or 6 of them over my life. And Blake, we're talking like stadium events, 50, 60,000 people. And so very much like a Billy Graham crusade, they would have all the major like Christian artists like Toby Mac, and I mean, I'm thinking back in like late 90s when I went, and then Pastor Greg would do the message and the altar call, and like thousands and thousands of people would come out of the stands and go down and like give their life to Jesus. Like these are major, amazing events. And
if only you had, Toby, the world would be such a better place if you'd also given your life to Jesus.
So Chris, are you guys still doing them to that level? And what's that like for you guys?
We actually, last year we moved from the stadium, Anaheim Stadium, to Honda Center because the stadium was so not willing for us to do the altar call, which is a big part of the crusade.
Yeah, just
But
was it
people walked
messing
down
up the field essentially?
Oh, I'm going to guess
their
safety
thought was
concern.
yeah, messing up the field was the biggest thing because it's in season. But it's so funny because they said no, but then a few weeks later they had an event in the field. And so we're like, really? So they got a lot of bad press for it
Yeah.
because it came off as though, sure, you're just saying it's because of the grass. We don't know that for sure. But so we ended up moving to Honda Center. We did it in a 360 in the round configuration. It was great. It was probably one of the more complicated arena versions we've done because it was in the round. So it's like sound times 4 because usually you're not facing 4 ways.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. And this year we're back at the stadium, so they kind of had a change of heart, thankfully.
Huh.
So we're back there July 20th. And we've got some pretty great artists lined up so far. And
Are you allowed to say who that is?
I think I can hint that most of them, yeah, Chris Tomlin, Phil Wickham, and Brooke Ligertwood, and then our band will be there as well.
Okay.
And then special guests who have not been announced yet. So
Would you say the stadium is an easier setup for production rather than the 360 in the Honda Center?
We all love the arenas because it's more controllable production wise. You're kind of exposed to the elements, and it's in July, so it's going to be really hot out here, especially. So I think production wise, we love the arena stuff because we could also prep it like to be like a tour, so the load in is less crazy.
Yeah.
At a stadium, it's very hard to do that, and the way you have to get in there and stay off the grass, it could be complicated. So the load in time is much more intense, but I think we just love also the vibe of the stadium because it's such a different experience versus a venue like an arena.
Yeah.
There's hits and misses and pros and cons. So,
and are those events like all on you and your team, or are you bringing in an outside production company? What's the percentage there?
yeah. So all of the design, production design, lighting design is all done in-house. The only thing that vendors are used for is the gear. So we really bring them in for rentals and additional team, like a system tech of audio was there and their crew as well. So, and an RF tech and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, our guys do monitors, front of house, lighting, programming, operating, cameras, directing. It's all in-house. We'll freelance some camera guys and some gear. But yeah, I'd say 90% of it is all in-house production wise, with the exception of gear.
Yeah, that's super cool. It's like an opportunity that most church techs don't get to experience, of like a stadium level touring production that's part of the church entity as well.
Yeah, it's been great. And this will be the 35th year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And I think they just announced probably about a year ago, it's the longest running evangelistic crusade outreach. So that's a cool thing to have under the belt.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we're so excited to be a part of it. And it's always a great thing to put on every year. We were really bummed during COVID when we couldn't do one.
Mm-hmm.
But then we went right back to it the following year. And it was great. So we've only missed one in 35 years. So
yeah,
it was great.
Okay, I want to go back to something you mentioned because now I'm curious. So the whole idea of the 360 in the round, I'm thinking of like, I know Ed Sheeran's been doing it on his tour. I've been to U2's 360 tour. What's it like from a production standpoint that all of a sudden you have to like give the same experience to everybody in a circle? Like, where's front of house go, and how do you program lights to make sure it's hitting everybody? What's that like?
Yeah, so I had to seek a lot of guidance from, I talked a lot with the guys at Passion and a couple other production guys, one who does work with a lot of in the round with our vendors that work out here at different companies to kind of get guidance on it, because we had never done in the round. A lot of us have worked on shows in the round, but never been in charge of designing, producing in the round. So we definitely knew when to ask for help. And the biggest thing is, lighting. You have to have 4 sides of lighting. And we didn't use follow spots necessarily. We used a system called Follow Me, or spot track. And so it's all those automated spot track systems that are great for that situation because you don't have to have a spot op at every side of the stage. So that helped with lighting. And we really just duplicated the lighting on 4 sides, and that helped a lot with it. Audio wise, we use Spectrum Sound, and they're kings at doing in the round. They do George Strait, and I think they're on Ed Sheeran as well.
Okay.
So they've got a lot of experience within the round. So that was like an easy thing for them to kind of come in and conquer. The downside is Honda Center is not an ideal space to do in the round. So rigging wise was kind of a nightmare because everybody had to be stacked on top of each other. So LED went up, then audio, then lighting, and it was like the out. Audio is usually always used to being the first out at the stadium or in the arena show, but they had to wait for everybody else to come down because they were the first in. So they weren't happy about that, but it was great. I could send you guys the photos of it too. It turned out great on camera.
Awesome.
And the experience was great, and being able to see people around the bands as well was awesome. And I think the camera guys also had to learn a thing or two about shooting in the round too, because you're shooting kind of at each other, and then someone's on stage there and everybody's shot because there's no like backstage. So front of house had to be put into the stands. We put it, I think, like up in the club section, and then monitors was still off to the one side of the stage. So there was kind of no getting away from that because of the way we are set up is more of like a festival configuration where there's multiple bands going up. So you have to have their guys right there, their guitar techs and monitor engineers. So it definitely adds an extra element of craziness. But it was great. It was fun.
Blake, I'm wondering why they didn't call you because you're in the round.
Oh, yeah. I'm the perfect shape and the perfect person to manage all this madness.
And people look at you from any angle and they get the full experience. Like you've somehow managed to put your personality in the round too.
Oh, 360-degree experience, man. That's the guarantee. I love, being standing out. And I bet, Chris, you loved that moment getting to watch the audio guys because you're a lighting guy. Get to see, you're not the most important one in the room. Sweet justice on the AVL inner civil war that we don't talk about, but we know happens at times.
Yep, I owed them a lot of coffee and In-N-Out for that, but
nice.
It was good to be out before them for once. So, it might be the same though.
Chris, I want to ask you about something that Blake and I have had the come to Jesus moments about when my vision is a lot bigger than time. What do you say, Blake? If I want you to something,
if I have enough time and money, I can do anything. Yeah. And you always give me 3 magic beans and a pat on the back.
And so obviously, Pastor Greg, I mean, you're talking 35 years, the Harvest Crusade, like big vision, big intention for the community and outreach. Like, how do you as a production team, as a production leader, kind of communicate with pastoral leadership of, well, if we want to do this is the manpower and the money involved to make it happen. Like, what are those conversations like for you guys?
Yeah, I think it's probably easier for us than a lot of people because they've been doing this before I was even born. And I think they just know that, to do a really good, high quality production event, it's not going to be a cheap thing. But also having the right people on team kind of eliminates that need to outsource and pay unnecessarily inflated costs. So really curating who's on the team and the way we hire people and bring them on. And then other people who are partners of the ministry, like a lot of the crusades are honestly paid by our donors and sponsors who own different businesses in the community or organizations that support us and other churches that help fund it as well. So that helps a lot. But then also just the production teams from other churches step in as well. Like there's a couple of churches around here, their production teams come and help us put it on. And so that helps a lot with costs. So, but if they had a vision that was over budget, we come back with them and, we do have like a meeting initially of what the dream is and we render it out. And really it's just being transparent with costs and having multiple versions of a design and rendering with a price tag attached to it essentially is the best way to go about it. We found, And then, yeah, just having options and what is necessary versus not necessary. As long as the most important part of the night, which is the gospel message, is lit and heard, great. Everything else is just icing on the cake. So, thankfully, we're able to put a lot of icing on the cake and make it look great because we do end up using it for TBN and television and schools and all that. So that helps needing the extra icing, but the main goal is always the gospel. So, yeah.
And, normal Sunday mornings compared to the Harvest Crusade, is the expectation like it's just as big and there's just as much icing, or do you guys function much more standard?
Yeah, it's definitely more chill than a crusade. We don't do a lot of flash and trash, and it's programmed for the most part that morning, lighting wise, but it's just a couple looks for worship. The biggest thing with Sundays, though, and it can be tricky, is the last minute changes that happen often. And so the crew is really solid. And I think we probably have the best crew with, if you come in with a picture during the last song before message, most likely it'll make it to the screen before you even get to the stage.
Yeah.
And so that's just one of the things that happen a lot. Like this past for Easter Sunday, Pastor Greg wanted to show a clip from Passion of the Christ, but we didn't get it up. We didn't get it in till that morning because it was being edited the night or two before. And so it was one of those things where we have great editors who could do it really quickly. We have a great video director who could get it and cut it in there in the right spot and make it look dramatic and like it was all planned the whole time. So, but yeah, that's probably where Sundays are more trickier. There is a lot more last minute stuff versus Crusades. It's a lot more timed out and planned ahead of time. But I think that's what makes Sundays great because you're not just bored. So sometimes it can get frustrating if I'm being honest, but most of the time there's not a lot of frustrating decisions. It's a lot of just, oh, by the way, we're going to add this. Okay, cool. We'll try. And they're totally gracious if we can't make it happen in time, which I think is important for leadership to understand is we could do this, but if it doesn't make it, don't be mad at us.
Blake, have I gotten any better at like last minute changes, or I give you this big project and then all of a sudden I'm like, no, let's shift gears, because I know I've done that a few times.
Toby, your thing is you don't give feedback until a 6-month delay because you don't like hard conversations. So I have to guess what Toby does and doesn't like for
sometimes
a good bit.
I just have to figure out how I feel about it. Like sometimes, I've told you I don't like it, but I don't have more clear direction, and so you have to just throw spaghetti at the wall and keep adjusting, and then finally I'm like, oh, I like that.
Chris, how do you feel about the feedback of I just don't like it?
I need it sometimes because if you hit too many home runs, it can get to your head, I think, honestly.
Chris, what are you doing, man?
That's a good point.
Don't tell him that.
Chris, we're in review season, and Blake's pretty much his prompting for his review is, okay, tell me how I can get the most 10s. And I'm like, right. Blake, I don't give out 10s because that means you have no room for improvement.
I did tell and I'm not going to give that away. That's my review for next year. Yes, I did figure that out. Let's say I've recalibrated what the optimal number is.
There you go.
For those.
Chris, do you have a philosophical approach to lighting for a Sunday morning worship service? Like, what you're aiming for in this current day and age?
I'd say probably less showy, if that makes sense. I think the current generation coming up is looking for a lot more, the word is kind of thrown around maybe too much, is being more authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think looking at it and not necessarily be I don't like throwing the word authentic around with lighting, but I think being intentional with it is definitely the way to go about it. Like, do you need to have the lights hit the audience in the lights every single song, or do you wait for that big, nice chorus moment and then obviously read the crowd? If you're like at first service and it's mostly the retired people, you probably wouldn't do that. And third service, when it is most of the younger people who slept in, then yeah, go for it. But it's definitely reading the room too. If people are in it and energized, then kind of match that with the lighting. I think a lot of times people think that the lighting is going to get people energized, and that's not the case a lot of the time. You like use the lighting to match the energy and not the other way around, because the lighting shouldn't necessarily be leading. I feel that's the worship part of the worship leaders. So, yeah.
And talk to me about your balance in approach of lighting between in the room for iMag, assuming you guys are doing iMag, and the live stream. What do you prioritize?
We have to find a happy balance because sometimes we can cater a bit much to camera for when it's a special deal and we know it's going to TBN for a special or something. But on a normal Sunday, yeah, it's finding that balance between not making it studio bright in the house for a sermon, but make it more comfortable for reading their Bible. But also you want the cameras to catch stuff up. So it's really just working closely with the video director and seeing what looks great and what you can maybe tone back on. And then, yeah, when we do like a night of worship, we just did one recently and it's not being broadcast anywhere. We'll just turn the iMag screens off and just do lyrics, but they'll still be shooting it for, a promo video for the next one or a recap video, or just so they could see what it looked like if they didn't get to make it. Like if Pastor Greg didn't get to make it, sometimes he will get a stream, like a private link. But yeah, it's just really depending on what the goal of the service is. And most of the time it's just balance.
You're not the first lighting guy to say this on the podcast. I've heard a lot more recently on here when we talk about lighting on you don't have to use every single light all the time and like match the room. Don't lead the room.
Really, the worship night we just had, I ended up renting, I think it was 7 Astera tubes. And for 90% of the night, those are the only lights on. And we have a moving light rig of nice fixtures, but it wasn't matching the tone that they wanted to convey and the experience they wanted to create. So yeah, like we used 7 tube fixtures versus our 20 lighting rig. So yeah.
And if your church has a smaller budget, I hope that's an encouragement to you that you don't need a million lights.
And I think the older I get, I won't say wiser because I wouldn't say I'm very wise.
You're wise.
But the greater artists, like the greater artists get, the more creative they get. I feel like the mindset shifts to what can I take out? Because I think young artists just coming up are like, what can I put in? And then as you crest that, older wisdom, you start to realize, no, it's about what can I take out until I have the ideal, image or creation or whatever it is, like with the least elements.
That's true. The more I've produced this podcast, I've been editing your voice out. I don't know if you listen on Mondays, but you're not even in the episode most
Blake,
of the time.
I will. and then I will.
Okay.
Blake, if you don't.
Yep. See, we're doing it right now. Oh. That actually, I think if you would have just stopped at the first one, it was really brilliant.
Thank you. So Chris, this is something I ask myself many times, every time, especially I look over at Blake and think like, gosh, I could have done so many things differently in my life and it would have turned out differently. What is some advice you would love to give to your young self, just starting out in production, especially in the area of lighting? So many young kids get into lighting first. I don't know if lighting is just the sexiest thing for the young guys to gravitate towards, but what would you tell your younger self?
I would say probably slow down because I did do a lot at once, and I still see a lot of people kind of do that where there seems to be it's the generation of you can get it now because you can literally order a pizza right now on your phone and get it in 10 minutes. And so I think having that kind of access makes people think they could get that with their career or just jobs in general. And so just kind of slow down and do some more learning and find some really good mentors. I had some great ones, but I also was just always busy doing stuff. And it felt like I was working too young, if that makes sense, because I was so passionate about it. But I would say, slow down. You don't have to get there right away kind of a thing. And I think that still applies today.
Chris, how do you find those good mentors? I'm still looking for one, I mean, sitting next to Toby, it's not doing me much good here.
It's kind of accidental, but I'd say the best advice I did get was find someone doing what you want to do when you're older, or who's doing what you eventually want to do, and ask them everything you can about how they got to where they're at. So it'd probably be the best idea, I think, that I was ever given. So
That's pretty good advice.
I have said it about Monty Kelso, who is the co-founder of Slingshot, and I even tell my wife, like, I want to be Monty when I grow up. So I've, continually I text Monty, I'm like, can we grab coffee and you can tell me more about how to be more like you?
Does he keep saying no? Is that why you're not getting any better? Toby's quite a disaster that we believe Monty can fix. And
As was
Chris,
that segue.
No, bull. If you don't call it out, it's not a disaster. All right. For Toby's performance review, I'm going to give him a 6.5 on podcast. Okay. Tell us about a disaster, Chris, that has happened. Maybe a moment that went wrong and how you saved it, or maybe it went really bad and how you explained that and communicated it with leadership afterwards. Just, those moments that come in production.
This happened last Friday. This just happened.
Nice.
So this is a good one. It wasn't me, but it speaks to the great teamwork that we have at our Irvine campus. And so,
do you want to say that person's name
No,
on the podcast?
Toby.
Throw him under the bus right now?
No.
I will shout out who did a really great job, but
Okay.
I'm not going to call out who made the mistake.
Process of elimination. We got it.
yeah.
Not everybody's like you, Toby, and shouts out everyone's mistakes.
So the Pastor John, who's Greg's son, was speaking at Good Friday service, and he was given the wrong mic when he came out to speak. And so that just created a chain reaction of disaster, because the front of house guy didn't know he had the wrong mic. So he had the wrong mic up, and then he tried that mic didn't work. And so he's like, what's going on here? Then the worship leader gives him his mic, which is already off because they finished worship. So that mic doesn't work. So he's got 2 mics in his hands now. Then the other worship leader gives him his mic, which is also off because they already finished worship. So he's got 3 mics in his hands now that don't work. And then finally, the stage manager brings out the mic that he was supposed to grab in the beginning, and that mic starts working. And so the great thing is, though, we're seeing this on a feed, and this is where the broadcast guy gets the shout out, because every mic worked on broadcast. Every fader was up. So you couldn't tell that it wasn't up, because he just has all the mics up at once, and then just to be safe, then he'll bring it down to the right mic, because he is anticipating that potential happening. So, shout out to the broadcast guy, because you couldn't tell that none of the mics were working. Every mic worked. So over here, we're like, I don't know what he's talking about. Every mic's working. So in the house, though, that's where it was probably chaos, because every mic was not working at the initial moment.
Okay,
But
Chris, an honest
Josh
question.
Burns, our broadcast guy in Orange County, by the way, want to shout him out. He did a really good job keeping on top of it. So
Nice work.
Say his name again. Who was it?
Josh Burns. He's
Josh
our
Burns.
broadcast engineer. Yeah.
As everything was burning down, Josh was on
That's
top
right.
of it.
So,
Exactly.
Chris, honest question: was it the tech's fault for handing the wrong mic, or was it the pastor's fault for grabbing the wrong one?
It was the tech's fault for looking at the mic. Yeah. So you live and you learn. But
I wanted to put it on the pastor.
he'll never
It's usually the
forget
pastor.
that again, because once that happens, it's honestly the best learning opportunity, because it won't happen again. And you don't necessarily need to punish, because the embarrassment alone is enough sometimes. And yeah, so.
Toby, when we launch our next Church Tech podcast, we're just going to call it I'll Never Do That Again, because every tech has one of these stories where they say they have a tick 20 years later after that moment where they're checking that thing like 5 times.
Mm-hmm. But Blake, I'm worried about you specifically, because what Chris just said, the embarrassment alone is enough to make sure he never does that again. Blake, you're never embarrassed.
This is why I'm not getting any better.
I know, because you have no shame.
Can I go to the shame store? Oh, goodness. Well, I'm going to do a shameless segue. That way I call it out before Toby can mess with me on it.
I like that one a little bit. That's okay.
There we go. Chris, if you were going to give a tech takeaway, what would you say to a room full of techs other than, hey, don't mess up that mic 4 times in a row? What would you give them that would make their Sunday better?
Oh man, let's see here. To make their Sunday better, I would say get some good sleep, because I I strongly believe that if you don't sleep enough the night before Sunday and you're playing video games or you went to Disneyland or somewhere, you might have a mistake on a Sunday. And I think there's been statistics like if you don't get enough sleep, the chances of a mistake happening are substantially higher. So I would say take care of yourself and get some sleep for sure. Yeah.
Toby, I love that one because we've done over 100 episodes, and I've worried about this segment. I've thought we're going to run out of unique pieces of advice. No one has said, hey, get some good sleep.
And just what you're saying, Chris, is absolutely correct. Blake, I don't know if you've known this, that...
You don't sleep at all, so that's why you're cranky?
Shut your mouth, boy. So every year for Spring Forward, when we lose an hour of sleep, that the next week, the accidents on the road increase by a notable percentage.
I will not be driving for the rest of my life that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, heart attacks go up 40% that week.
Crazy. Just 1 hour of lost sleep.
Yeah.
It's so wild.
Crazy. That's one article. I don't know if I would trust it, but I'm sure it does go up quite a bit.
Toby, you were a worship leader for years. Did you ever have any like restless nights that you then noticed?
100%. Yeah. And, you know, in my 20s as a worship leader, I was not used to going to bed super early. Like I'd go to bed at like midnight, maybe 1 o'clock. But when you've got to be at church at like 6:30 in the morning on Sunday, I'm trying to, you know, will myself to go to bed at 9:30 or 10. And it's tough. But I knew that, you know, especially when you're leading 2 or 3 services the next morning, that is so exhausting that if you don't have good sleep, like it's going to be rough.
True.
Well, and this becomes more important as you age, because I know one person who in his 20s stays up to like 2 a.m., wakes up at 6, drives 2 hours another direction, does like 3 services, and he's fine. And now that person goes to sleep at like 5, I think, on Saturday. So that's quite wild.
Yeah.
Get your sleep. Well, Chris, what's some things you should plug? What's some things that people shouldn't be sleeping on? What's some things you want to point people towards?
Well, our production team has a Instagram, so you can see what we're doing, what we're cooking up, and that's
Harvest shout it out.
Crusades official on Instagram. I have an Instagram, Chris for Lights, and so I post a lot of stuff that we do on there. And then on YouTube, I've got a channel that's kind of there when we have time to do it. It's called Crew Talk Live, and so it's a lot of like product reviews, and we have a little podcast thing as well. With guests and all that. So yeah, those are kind of the main things. And then obviously if you're interested in the Harvest Crusade, you could go to harvest.org and check out where it's coming next. So we've got a couple of locations next year that we're going to that's not California.
Oh, that's fun.
Toby, I'm really jealous of Crew Talk as a name. That's like a really great name.
I know, almost as good as Crew Brew. It's like the crews should get together.
We should, honestly.
Yeah, the crews should go on a cruise. I beat you to it, Blake. You should get more sleep.
And it should scare you that we both thought of the exact same joke. Well, Chris, thanks for joining us on the show, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me to come on, and it's been great. Love the podcast. I'm an avid listener, so.
You're too kind.
Of course.
Hey, listeners. It's time for Church Tech Confessionals. The time for any church tech to anonymously confess the worst thing they've ever done in church production. Here's one now.
Church Tech Confessional.
So one time at a church, I was mixing front of house on a Sunday morning, and we used to have somebody come up and pray at the end of the service over their offering on a specific microphone. It was pretty much the same way every weekend, but I did not get much sleep the night before and fell asleep during the sermon, and the mic didn't come on, and I woke up right at the end and turned the music on and came downstairs because we were up in a booth, and the pastor asked me, hey, did you fall asleep up there, or why was the microphone not working? I said, I don't know, I turned it up and it wasn't working. And he said, you sure you didn't fall asleep? And I said, no. He said, well, why do you have a big red mark on your forehead? And it was from my head landing on the console while I was sleeping. Don't lie to your pastors. They'll figure it out. I still fall asleep now. Luckily, I got a light guy that'll nudge me. I'll doze off. I won't really fall asleep, but I'll kind of close my eyes and put my head back. But no, I've definitely fallen asleep more than once. Back then, we did a Saturday night service and like 3 Sunday morning services. And I was 19 years old, and I just wanted to go do fun things on the weekend. So I would stay up all night. I had to be there so early, and I would go to like all ages shows. And anyways, and then so I fell asleep a lot.
Hey, if you have your own 3 to 5 minute church tech confessional, record it and send it to podcast@churchgear.com. And don't worry, we'll apply a voice changer and you'll be 100% anonymous. Your pastor will never know.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Okay, Blake, so I'm thinking maybe the Grammys isn't the realistic one for us to host, but maybe the Harvest Crusade? Maybe you and I could host the Harvest Crusade?
Toby, I don't think anyone would come down to the front to get saved after that.
I don't think so. I think it would have a reverse effect.
People give their lives to the devil?
No. People are like, well, I gave my life to Jesus, but if Toby and Blake are what it's like to be a Christian, then forget it.
If they're going to be in heaven, we're not signing on to that. And as Chris says, make sure you send this to some people so that they get to hear the podcast.
If we got all of our millions of listeners to then send this episode to maybe Pastor Greg, I mean, we might have a shot to host someday.
There we go.